Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Hello, Ross. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good and you, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. It's my pleasure. I'd like to start off this morning by introducing the listeners to you. How do you describe yourself and what you do?
I'm an origami artist, paper folding artist, and an Instagrammer. I do photography and a whole bunch of other stuff as well, but I think that's kind of the category, if Instagram is a category of of jobs. But yeah, I mean, I run campaigns on Instagram, and a lot of, the base of what I do and mostly what I do is centered around origami and particularly around origami stop frame animation and doing installations.
Mm-hmm. So that is very specific and very interesting, because you don't really hear a lot of professional origami artists. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of them exist. It's just it doesn't I guess come across my day to day. So I'm curious. So were there experiences or something something that you had early on in your childhood or even later on in life that got you interested in specifically origami art?
So when I think I was about 21, my brother asked me to learn how to fold just a little origami crane, which is sort of the symbol. I mean, we all know the crane that you see all over the place. Mm-hmm. And I folded that. It was for a project he was busy with. And it was just a habit of whenever I found a piece of paper, I'd learnt that design and just folded it over and over. It was a cool party trick. And, it's like, grab the piece of paper, fold the thing. I'd end up tearing my beer bottle labels off, and turning it into a little crane, giving it to someone, a girl, if there was a girl nearby, mm-hmm. whatever. And that's all it ever was. It was never anything I thought it could be, anything I thought could be more than just that. And that's kind of where I picked it up. And it was about 2013 where I started just looking for more designs. I found I was doing it a lot more often. I was becoming quite interested in it. I started following other origami artists online, and I saw, cool, I'm kind of interested in this, so let's get a couple of books, do a few tutorials online and see where this goes. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow, okay. So I'm curious then, because I'm pretty sure that's not what you went to school for originally. So if you wouldn't mind walking us through your journey of what you went to school for originally, and then your first few jobs before you got involved in origami art.
So I finished school in 2000, and I then went to university for about 6 months. Didn't really crack on with what I was supposed to be doing. And my dad said to me, he's like, maybe you should take a few months off. So I took the rest of the year off and then went back to study, and I went to hotel school. I figured I needed to get something. I didn't have a clue of what I wanted to do. Hospitality management was, kind of something that I'd thought of doing, and I was interested in cooking and stuff. So I thought, well, let's just do this and see what happens. So I did that course and I finished it. But I think I initially just went into that because I knew I just wanted to get something that I could potentially fall back on. It wasn't something that I was, I had this burning desire to go run hotels or run restaurants. Okay. But I went and did that. And as a result of doing that, I've always been into computers. I've had a computer in front of me since I was, sort of 6 or 7 years old. So once I finished studying the hotel school, there was an IT company that was looking for recruits to come work for them, particularly in the hospitality field. So installing reservation systems in restaurants and hotels. So I started, once I finished studying, I went and worked for that company for about 2 years. I then went back to study after working out that my interest in computers and programming particularly was quite keen. So I went and studied software development. And while I was studying software development, I joined the university radio station. So I had about 2 years of radio. I then signed up to one of the bigger radio stations in Johannesburg. That was where I was living at the time. And did that for a while, and when I was done with my studies, I moved down to Cape Town, stopped the radio gig, and I moved down to Cape Town to use this new sort of skill that I had, which was the ability to program and code websites and applications and stuff. And that moved me into a web developer role for advertising agencies and small companies and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, so now I guess I need to know, how did you then make the transition from what you're doing working in for web agencies in IT to then your career now as an origami artist? Did that just did you just wake up and just go, okay, suddenly I'm done with this, I want to become an origami artist? Was it a little more of a I guess maybe a gradual transition?
No, it was definitely gradual. I was still working in advertising agencies. One of the last jobs I had, I was never really fulfilled in my job, but I always found that I was sitting, either bugging the person next to me or folding something. Mm-hmm. I always had these, little tutorial on my computer screen when I was supposed to be putting a website live or, making updates to an application or something. I still remember my project manager standing behind me the one day, and he was kind of peering over my shoulder. I had my computer screen open. I was folding this little, just watching the tutorial of, I don't know, origami duck or whatever. Mm. And he kind of said to me, he's like, dude, what are you doing? We've got to have this thing live. I'm like, just give me a hand or just give me a second. I just want to finish this and, I'll continue with my work. So I decided then, maybe this, the working for somebody else, and particularly in the advertising space, wasn't really my thing. So I quit that job and then went on to another job, but I just thinking that maybe it was the environment that I was in. Maybe I needed to change places, because I kind of enjoyed the programming. I enjoyed, building websites. Mm-hmm. And all the while I had this little origami thing. I mean, my desk was always just littered with, just around the screen with just these little paper creations all over the place of stuff I'd do during my lunch break, or, if I got there early in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I saw, and people started giving me books. They were saying, this origami stuff you're doing is pretty cool. I was like, okay, thanks. So I decided in 2014 that, okay, cool, I was going to take this year to just dedicate the entire year to getting better at origami. So I decided I was going to do an Instagram project where I basically found designs in books online or whatever, and folded one different figure every day of the year, and took a photo of it and posted it onto Instagram. Mm-hmm. I had opened an Instagram account earlier in 2013, and all I had ever posted onto it was origami. So I just kind of, carried on with that theme. And that kicked off my 365 days of origami on Instagram. I had about 120 odd followers, which, when you start your Instagram accounts, people friends from Facebook, whatever. And it was that year, it was 3 months into that year that I decided that I was going to quit my job. The plan was, the origami thing was just this little project I was busy with, but I knew I wasn't really feeling my work in what I was doing in my day-to-day job. So a friend of mine came to me, he was like, cool, he wants to start this company. It's electronics-based, something, mm-hmm. which at the time I was kind of into. And I was going to do freelance work. I was getting quite a lot of freelance websites, just little gigs on the side, which I thought, cool, I can make money from that. And I always just thought to myself, well, let me just quit the job. The worst thing that can happen is I run out of money, which I had a little bit saved. I had about 2 months salary saved. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I could always go back to the job. It's not like I'm leaving here, torching the place as I'm walking out saying, fuck you, I'm never seeing you again. I kind of kept the relationship with all my previous employees and the people I worked with. I always had, it was always friendly and good. So I knew that I could always go back to that job, or any one of those jobs that I'd previously quit.
Okay.
And as soon as I did that, as soon as I had time to myself, because now I didn't have I wasn't really worrying too much about the money. I had a bit of money, but I was like, cool, I've got all this time for myself. But the origami thing this project was really starting to take a lot of my time and interest, and people started coming up to me not coming up to me, but speaking to me online, and friends and family that were like, dude, this thing you're doing is really cool. Like, and I was just like, well, okay, thanks. The goal was for me to do one thing every day, or one little origami piece every day for the entire year. That honestly was the entire goal. I didn't worry about whether my account would increase in following, how many likes or comments I got on the posts, whatever. And so that just carried on. And about halfway through the year, I decided I was going to brand the whole project. So I called it White on Rice. White on Rice came from a friend of mine who would see my stuff all over the place. And the expression white on rice means you've got it covered, you're all over the place. Mm-hmm. So she was like, man, I see your stuff everywhere. You're like white on rice, hashtag white on rice, white on rice. I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool name for an origami brand. I mean, you know, paper's white, rice is Asian, mm-hmm. and the art of origami is a Japanese art. So I thought, well, cool, let's call it white on rice. And as soon as that happened, I think the perception of the project changed. I was no longer this guy folding paper, in the little fishing village at the bottom of Africa. It was this origami-inspired lifestyle brand, which I was still doing the same thing, but it was the perception of the whole thing. And my following started increasing, and slowly it got to the point where I got picked up by Instagram. Someone at Instagram saw my stuff. They were like, dude, we'd love to feature you. And that was in about, I think, October of that year. So it's sort of 10 months into the project. And I'd posted every day. Well, there was one day I skipped, but I'll get to that. And I just carried on with it. I got featured by Instagram, and that just took my following to, it was a crazy amount. I remember the day that I got featured, I went from about 10,500 followers to about close to 40,000 in about 4 hours. It was the craziest thing that's ever happened.
Wow.
But again, I know it's nuts, man. But I just had to keep reminding myself that it was never about that. I didn't start this project obviously it's pretty overwhelming when you start getting all these notifications of whatever's going on your account. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, no, just stay focused on what the next thing I was going to fold. And that kind of kept me going through until the end of the year. And towards the end of the year, I started experimenting with stop frame animation, which is something I'd been interested in for a long time since I was a kid. Animation in particular, but particularly stop frame animation for some reason. I've tried to make music. I played guitar for a long time. So I figured I wanted to try and take sound, music, this new origami art thing that I had, and Instagram, and put everything together. And that's where I came with the stop frame animations, which is not something new. I mean, many people have done this. Mm-hmm. But I just thought, cool, let's just see what happens when I start putting that out. And as soon as I started doing that, I think brands started saying, cool, this guy's got a bit of a following. He can tell stories with his origami art, and he can fold stuff. So it's like, cool, let's see if he's willing to do a few brand campaigns. And that was at the end of the year. My following ended at the end of that year on about 50,000 followers. And I just decided then, when I started getting approached by all these brands, like, cool, this is what I'm going to do. And that was, so that was the beginning of 2015. So just over 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I've never spoken with someone who has make Instagram their full-time gig. I'm really curious on how this works now. So now that you've got this following and you've got corporations interested in you, do they reach out to you on Instagram? Do they find you off Instagram? Nowadays, do you go out and reach out to people? Do they find you? How does that business side work?
I fortunately haven't really had to go out and look for work. And I think that's because my sort of internet presence, because of Instagram, you can find me anywhere. So if somebody Googles, I have quite a specific skill, which is origami, the ability to fold paper. And I have a website. I'm available on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere, that I've put all my content out there. And I think it's just one of those things because I have quite a large following on Instagram, brands are looking for ways to promote their own brand in a more sort of, I suppose, a styled or curated way. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Instagram, people that have larger followings on Instagram have a particular style. My style just happens to involve or incorporate origami. But you'll look at any photographers or I don't know, jewelry makers or whatever, if they've got something that is a little bit different and they have a story element to it, then brands will reach out to them and say, hey, listen, we've got this campaign where we trying to use, or we're going to be using what you would refer to as influencers, so people with larger followings that can help